Hi everyone, Justine Brooks-Volker here with Therapy Thursday. And it's week 4 of my boundary series. So we have talked about my fence metaphor, we have talked about people-pleasing, caretaking, and perfectionism, and we've talked about the empty well. I'm going to include those video links in the comments of this video. And this week we're going to talk a little bit about the work that I do in my Rising Ever Upward workshops and intensives. So you can see this is our Rising Ever Upward workbook. This is one of the toughest assignments that we do. And then this is the boundaries sheet that we do. And so what Brene talks about is a lot of the times we struggle to set boundaries with people because there are several barriers of boundaries that came up in the data. So she lists them on the bottom of this page. Perfectionism, fear of grief, sadness, fear, and self-judgment. So we judge ourselves. Because I think a lot of times what holds us back from setting boundaries is that we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We don't want to come off as someone who can't handle it all, right? Like the mom that says no isn't doing a good job of doing it all, being this woman that we can do everything and have it all and do it perfectly and look hot doing it. Such crap. Also sadness, and grief, fear of grief, because when we work to accept someone's limitations and set boundaries with them, realizing and admitting that we're not going to be able to get what we need from them, that means that we're going to have grief. I have to admit to myself that my loved one doesn't have what I need, and then I have to go find it somewhere else, and that the relationship probably changes. The thing is that when we allow these barriers to be why we're not setting our boundaries, what suffers is us, and it also the relationship also suffers because resentment builds up, hurt builds up. Those of us who set boundaries, I'm pretty hardcore on boundaries. I just really don't do stuff anymore that I don't want to do. I just don't. I say no a lot, and I say yes more. And those two things can coexist, right? The complicated gray. So like Brene says in the curriculum, I'm not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm far more loving, is what she says. And I have found this to be true. I don't feel so drained, sucked dry, like I'm always giving and never receiving. When we're not setting boundaries because we're fearful or we're scared of these barriers to it, fear of grief, perfectionism, self-judgment, hurting other people's feelings, when we're allowing those barriers to win, we suffer and the relationship suffers. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions of boundaries, that well, if I said no, then the relationship would be gone or ruined. And it's your relationship's already not great because you're resentful all the time because you are not saying no when you really need to say no. Or you're not asking for more from that person. And so I want you to think about that this week. What are the barriers that are stopping you, that are holding you back, you think, from setting boundaries? Is it perfectionism, which we kind of already talked about 2 weeks ago? Is it grief? Is it fear of judgment? Is it fear? Is it fear of hurting people? And what would it be like for you to actually try with one of the, someone that's really important to you that you're feeling a little resentful towards? What would it be like for you to try to set some of these boundaries? Because I'm willing to bet that your relationship would actually deepen and become more engaged because you're not so resentful all the time. And also, remember what we already talked about. 99% of someone's response to you is about them, and vice versa, right? But you have no idea what's going on in that person's life. So what if you actually talked with them about this and said, you know what, I'm realizing I really need to work on some boundaries, and I'm wondering, will you help me with that? Will you hold me accountable to that? Get an accountability partner. A boundary accountability partner. Oh, that's good stuff, Justine. That's good. That's your assignment this week. I'll see you next week. I think we got one more week on boundaries, okay? And I'll see you next Thursday. Thanks.